and Chief Executive of NECA, as well as the Registrar of CIPM and Chief Executive, share some thoughts and share their words with us. Please note that we'll be keeping to time, and the rules, some rules have earlier been shared with us. We'd like us to drop our comments, questions in the chat room component of this facility. We'll be reaching out to you. The questions will all be looked into, please, so that we have orderliness. On that note, I just want to go briefly into, I've already introduced our speakers, to thank them so very much. I would like to yield the floor to my colleagues because I'll be on this call alongside with two of my colleagues, Olushola Ayodele and Tomiloba Babarimbe. I'd like the two of them to please kindly take a brief, I repeat, brief profile of the four personalities that will be having these discussions with us. Shola, over to you.
Good morning once again, guests. Just to give a brief profile of our speakers for today, I would like to start from Mr. Adeyemi Adediran. Mr. Adeyemi Adediran is a partner in the Commercial Practice Group at the Andersen in Nigeria. He has over 15 years experience in providing tax compliance and advisory services to clients operating in the various sectors and industries. He started his professional services career with KPMG, where he rose to the post of manager in the Consumer Markets Group. Prior to joining Andersen, he was the group tax manager of Flour Mills of Nigeria PLC, one of the largest manufacturing conglomerates in Africa and a member of NECA. He also collaborated with multidisciplinary teams of middle and senior management personnel in various organizations to achieve optimal tax efficiency and operational effectiveness. He has also led several engagement teams to provide tax advice on various taxes, including the CIT, company income tax, personal income tax, VAT, as well as withholding tax. Over the years, he has developed the relevant network, contacts, and relationship with regulatory authorities needed for optimal business performance and resolution of tax review and investigation issues. So that's just a brief summary of Mr. Adeyemi Adediran. I'd like to go straight to Dr. Adedipe. Dr. Adedipe is the founder and chief consultant of B. Adedipe Associates Limited, that's BBA Consult. With over 44 years of postgraduate work and professional experience in university teaching, investment banking, project management, and financial consulting, as well as leadership in business and not-for-profit organizations. Dr. Adedipe has had an illustrious career that took him through the University of Lagos, Enterprise Consulting Group, the World Bank, the Africa Region, International Merchant Bank PLC, and First City Monument Bank PLC. He received his doctorate degree in industrial economics, specializing in corporate finance from the University of Lagos in 1989. He also had a BSc in economics with a first-class honors from Obafemi Awolowo University in 1980. He bagged several awards in the process, including Sir Adam Thompson Scholarship as visiting doctoral student to the University of Sussex in the UK in 1984. He is a member of several respected professional bodies and membership organizations, including the Chartered Institute of Directors, Nigeria. He's a fellow and council member of IOD, Chartered Institute of Bankers of Nigeria, also a fellow, the Nigeria Economic Society, a live member, American Economic Association, a member, as well as a council member of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Dr. Abiodun Adedipe founded BAA Consult in February 1993, and he served as the CEO for 30 years, from March 1994 up until May 2024, when he transited into a new role of Chief Marketing Officer for BBA Consults, starting June 2024. He sits on the boards of some profit-seeking and not-for-profit organizations, in diverse capacity as chairman, non-executive director, as well as independent director. Straight to the next person, that's the chairman of NECA Finance, ex-Committee of Finance, Mr. Olumuyiwa Adebayo. Mr. Olumuyiwa Adebayo is a distinguished finance executive with extensive expertise in financial reporting, risk management, taxation, and adherence to international financial standards. His academic achievements include a higher national diploma in business administration from Yaba College of Technology, a bachelor's degree in actuarial science, that's from the University of Lagos, and an MBA from University of Cumbria in UK. Further, he holds an advanced certification in transfer pricing, that's in Middlesex University in the UK, data science and AI from the University of Texas at Austin, as well as blockchain technology from the University of Cape Town. Olumuyiwa is an internationally certified professional, holding the CFA Charter, FRM, that's from the USA, as well as fellowship from ICANN, CITN, and Institute of Credit Administration. He's also a CGMA, ACMA holder, alongside ACCA, IFRS Diploma, and CIMA Advanced Diploma in Management Accounting. He holds the prestigious FIMC and CMC designation. Professionally, Mr. Adebayo has made significant contributions in banking, risk management, and at Deloitte IFRS advisory, where he played a key role during Nigeria's IFRS adoption. Currently, as a group head of tax and financial controls at Sahara Group, a multinational energy conglomerate, he oversees tax planning, transfer pricing, financial reporting, risk management, capital allocation, and financial strategies across trade, upstream, downstream, power and infrastructure, ensuring alignment with strategic and compliance goal of Sahara Group. A passionate educator and mentor, Olumuyiwa impacts knowledge through professional tutorials for ICANN, ACCA, and others, currently leading financial reporting at Wise Associates Limited. Beyond his professional responsibility, he engages the digital space as a YouTuber on financial reporting, tax, and financial modeling, and as a data science enthusiast who developed the POI Nomics GPT AI chatbot. So we welcome also Mr. Olumuyiwa Adebayo. And the last on the list, Mrs. Aimea Okpebolo. She's a senior reform leader at the Presidential Enabling Business Environment Council, PEBEC, in Nigeria. That's PEBEC was established to oversee reforms aimed at improving Nigeria's business climates. The primary objective of PEBEC is to remove bureaucratic and legislative constraints and enhance the perspective of the ease of doing business in the country. I think the profile of Mrs. Okpebolo, okay. Additionally, she leads the project implementation units for the State Action on Business and Enabling Reforms program, which is a 750 million three-year performance-based initiative designed by the World Bank and PEBEC to strengthen and incentivize business reforms across Nigeria, providing technical assistance to all the 36 states as well as the Federal Capital Territory. In the technical assistance component, she leads disbursement-linked indicator, that's DLI 5 and 8, which focus on enhancing transparency in fees and procedures and ensuring quick determination of commercial disputes. Previously, she was the senior reform leader for legal interventions and administration / with human resources at PEBEC Secretariat. Where she played a key role in the drafting, passage, and signing into law of the Business Facilitation Miscellaneous Provision Act 2022 and the Insolvency Regulation of 2022, modernizing business laws in Nigeria. She also led the establishment of small claims courts in 20 states, improving access to justice for micro, small, and medium enterprises, and resolving over 7,000 cases. Aimea's career includes significant contribution at the Nigerian Law Reform Commission, where she participated in law reforms, represented the Commission at National Assembly bill hearings, and authored reports for proposed reforms. She holds an LLB from Ambrose Ali University, Ekpoma, and an LLM in legislative drafting from the National Institute for Legislative and Democratic Studies, University of Benin. She is an associate member of the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria. We welcome Mrs. Belinda Okpebolo. So that's just the brief summary of our presenter for today, Mr. Pablo.
Thank you so much, Shola. We'll go briefly to the opening remarks and the background by the DG of NECA. My DG, sir, you have the floor. Mr. DG NECA, you are muted, sir.
Good morning, colleagues.
Good morning, DG.
And thank you for joining us in this very important and timely event, the our CEO discourse. As my colleague have said, Thompson and Shola, we're happy to have you join us. It's one of the many series of engagement that we have planned and we'll continue to run with a very important partner, the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Personnel Management. Well, I think we have the President and Chairman of Council with us of CIPM. I also believe strongly that we also have our one president of NECA, who probably will join us shortly. So this is one of the many collaborative programs that will be running with the CIPM, and this is more relevant now because of the realities that we all face, the realities of the budget, the reality of the implementation of the budget in 2025, the reality of the current borrowing level of government to fund the budget, the realities of the issue of the tax reforms that has generated a lot of controversy, the realities of the regulatory environment in which we all operate in currently. So those issues prompted our desire, NECA and CIPM, to come up with this program so that we can continue to enlighten our members and enlighten ourselves on the risks that we face and the opportunities that exist, and how to reposition ourselves to maximize the information that get us. And we believe strongly that learning and relearning and also unlearning by the time we end this session today. Thank you very much, and over to you, Thompson.
Thank you so much, DG. As the DG NECA has already stated, it is NECA in collaboration with CIPM. I would like to yield the floor to the Registrative Executive of CIPM for her brief remarks. Madam, you do have the floor, please. The registrar, CIPM, please. You are muted. I just got an information that they have a bit of technical hitches, but she will be joining us shortly. And I'll propose that we do go ahead, and when she is finally joined, we can still yield the floor to her for her remarks. Thank you so very much. Dr. Abiodun, sir.
Thompson, the registrar CEO will be joining us in a minute, just to let you know. The registrar CIPM will be joining us in a minute, just to keep you in the loop.
Okay. We are wanted to proceed when she joins. We'll then hear the floor for remarks. Just to save
Absolutely.
time. Okay. Thank you, sir. Dr. Abiola Adenikpe, thank you so much for joining us. We are quite aware of the time difference in terms of zonings. You have been made a co-host, meaning you can share your slides, and you have 20 minutes for your presentation. As they will say, your time starts now. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so very much. And a very good morning to you all, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, and especially the leadership of NECA and CIPM. Thank you for having me on this call. So I will share my slides and speak to them very quickly within the time allotted. And I'm very sure that everyone will get a copy of the slide deck. So in that case, we don't need to worry about me going through all the slides one by one. So I will speak to the key ones, and then we focus on the key issues. Let me turn off my video so that we can focus on the slides. And we see the title there, 2025 National Budget, Issues and Opportunities for Enterprises. Now, typically, there are two perspectives to budget interpretation. One is either to critique it, which is what most of people like me, professional economists, do, or we want to seek opportunities, which in fact is the purpose of this conversation today. Now, if we want to critique, we challenge the focus of the budget, we challenge the assumptions, we look out for internal consistency, we look at the numbers, then we say, okay, what will be the outcome? Is this a surplus or a deficit? If it is deficit, how will the deficit be funded? And of course, we talk about the policy initiatives. If we are probing for opportunities, two things will matter. Number one, we microscope the allocations. So if so much money is going to be spent, where is it going to? In which case, as we commonly say, as business people, we follow the money. Then secondly, we look out for the policy initiatives. What are the key directions of government in 2025? So how now will those things impact us? Which ones represent opportunities? Which ones are threats? If they are threats, how do we protect our enterprises? And of course, if there are opportunities, how do we expropriate them? So what I have done here then is to put a few foundational issues, and this is important for us, especially for anyone doing business in Nigeria or anywhere in the world as of today. And my surmise is that a mind trained to see opportunities will not surrender to or complain about problems. And that is the perspective from which I'm looking at this. Now, Joe Biden also said, progress is impossible without change. And those who cannot change their minds cannot change anything. So that brings in perspective the reforms that the current government is carrying out, focusing on three major issues: oil production, how to increase that to 2 million barrels per day; trade, how to boost it to support current account. Current account, by the way, is what you might call the summary of our interaction with the rest of the world. We produce, we sell to them. They also produce, we buy from them. So what is the outcome of that? Is there surplus current account position? How is that also playing out in interaction with the capital account to create what they call balance of payment? And of course, how that also affects our external reserve. The agri sector has been the largest contributor to our GDP over so many years, maybe decades now, but very low in productivity, of course, in terms of also creating jobs in recent times. So again, we understand why reforms will go that way. Now, this connects directly to the budget. And that's why I decided to include this slide also in my deck. What is the government doing in terms of reforming revenue? Looking at MDAs and government-owned enterprises, how they intend to automate twice daily sweep of 50% of their IGR. That is what they generate. All revenues, as I said, safeguard and progress of 2 million barrels per day. Non-revenue, let's expand the tax base. And that is to say, improve compliance and automate excise duty, review tax exemptions and duty waivers, and then recalibrate incentive structure. Government assets, what do we do with them? Near term, long term. How do we, generate value from those government assets, which of course has led into a lot of changes in Murphy in terms of operations and how it deals with our national assets. Now, so far, this government has introduced 13 reforms that are summarized in this particular table. A friend shared this on a platform I belonged to yesterday, and I thought it's something to look at. So I put a question there for us for the discourse today. What opportunities can you identify and find in these 13 reforms? Oil sector, manufacturing, CNG, credit corp, NEL fund, youth sector, fiscal and monetary reforms, business reforms, and I believe sister here, Pebek, we speak to that. International cooperation, power sector reforms, infrastructure, agri and housing. Now, what kind of environment are we as of today? Talking about budget 2025, at least there's a background to that. And what I have here is a macroeconomic dashboard that gives a point as to where we were as at yesterday, because all of these are updated yesterday evening. And of course, we can see clearly here, yes, the economy is growing, but not growing fast enough and not growing inclusively. To grow inclusively means it's not creating jobs. And I've always said this repeatedly over the years, and maybe decades, I will say now, that it is the private sector that creates jobs. So whenever the government is coming out with budget, therefore, I look out for those things in the budget that will incentivize private sector activities so that jobs can be created in the number that will make growth of the economy inclusive. And of course, we know the tortuous exchange rate issue, the premium between the official and the parallel market as of yesterday, have that their monetary policy rate, 27.5%, very high. Of course, we also know why. CBN says their primary goal is to target inflation and also go the orthodox way. And of course, inflation data came out for November 2024 at 34.6%, and that is quite high. Some reports say it's a 28-year high, but again, I asked myself, 28 years, we roll it back all the way to 1996. But even at that, I asked myself, yes, 1995, we looked at more than double this rate, because that was the highest ever inflation rate in our history at 72%, in 1995. Now, not playing too much on these, I now said, let's look at the budget itself and what are the critical issues. Number one, what is the focus? The focus is stability, efficiency, and sustainable economic growth. Then the three major assumptions, and that is where we ask ourselves whether these assumptions are realistic or not. But again, I put a few data after this slide to show whether these assumptions are realistic or not. Exchange rate for the budget is assumed at 1,500 naira to the dollar. Crude oil benchmark price at $75 per barrel. And don't forget, we are not talking about Brent here in our own price assumption. We are talking about our own major benchmark, that is the body line. And of course, production estimates at 2.06 million barrels per day. This assumption produced the numbers we see here in terms of expenditure, 47.96 trillion naira, of course, the highest in naira terms. And then when you convert that at the exchange rate assumed here, it gives you about $34.21 billion. And of course, if you look at that historically, yes, we've been higher than that a little, but this, no doubt, is an improvement in what we have had in recent years. Revenue expectation, 34.82 trillion naira. Again, convert to dollars, you see 24.87. Then budget deficit, 13.13 trillion naira. How will that be funded? Of course, there'll be borrowing domestically and also some external borrowing as well. Looking at the expenditure side, very interesting development here. If you look at the allocations, capital expenditure this year, and that is a bit of improvement, is higher than debt servicing. Debt servicing coming at 15.81 trillion naira compared to capital expenditure of 16.48 trillion naira, 32.5%. That's an improvement in terms of allocation for capital expenditure, but it's also in the assumption that the bulk of this is not on fixed assets. And that is talking about vehicles, talking about furniture, talking about, office equipment and the rest of it. We look at this from the perspective of what exactly does this translate into. But we must also not forget that the current expenditure at 40.21 trillion naira is not only about spending. There are some capital expenditures that create their own recurrent spending as well. So we also understand that there can be some kind of relationship between capital and recurrent spending. Statutory transfers, 4.26 trillion naira. Now, that makes up the numbers produced by these assumptions. But what is the deficit? 3.89% of our GDP. Well, again, higher than the threshold, but we also know that the Fiscal Responsibility, Act puts a mandate maximum of 3%. Yes, at 3.89% is above that benchmark, but at the same time, there's a caveat in there that if the exigency of the movement's demand, it can be greater than 3% of GDP. So I don't have any problem with that as an interpreter of the budget. But now let's now look at what can give us some measure of, an interesting perspective to all of this. So I roll back to 2013 and looked at the revenue expenditure nexus. How has it been like over the last 10 years before coming to 2023? From 2013 to 2023 are actual spendings and vis-a-vis actual revenue. 2024 is the budget for this year, expenditure versus revenue. Then the budget for 2025. We can see how it has been trending upwards gradually over the years, but a major leap in 2025. So, but of course, we can also understand that a lot of today's structural defects and misalignment actually came from this nexus. If you look, for example, that at 2013 to date, expenditure always exceeded revenue, but the gap between them became significant, especially in the last 7 years. And so that tells you where the challenge has been. So the inflationary pressures we see today were not created immediately now. It was long in coming. Now, for those who also look at crude oil prices, what I have in this particular slide is the table of average crude oil prices actual from 2014 to 2024. The figure for 2024 represents the average for January to October this year, based on the bankers' record. When I say banker, I mean the Central Bank of Nigeria, that gives an account of how much it generates from the sale of crude oil and what the average price was in every of those years. And that is what I have on this particular slide. We can see the figures there, how we came down from $100.35 per barrel to 54 in 2017, and then 40 in 2020, the year of COVID. And of course, it picked up in 2022, going to $104.62 per barrel, a very interesting year. But of course, all of that, and it shows clearly, significantly above the budget assumption. And of course, coming to this year at $84.07 per barrel, up until October this year. Production, we can see the trajectory of production. Why the price is trending upwards, looking at 2014 till date, the production and export have been trending downwards since the same 2014 to 2024. Now, given that, what are the key issues then we can look at here and begin to see snipers of opportunities? What are the fiscal challenges? High debt service to revenue ratio, which incidentally in this 2025 budget is lower than what we had in recent 3 to 4 years. But there's low revenue generation related to GDP, in which case there's a lot that the government is also doing in that space. How do we increase revenue relative to GDP? And of course, the significant budget deficit with planned borrowing of 9.22 trillion, naira. Of course, high inflation rate, we saw that earlier in what I mentioned. CBN, of course, in what we call rate guidance by the CBN governor, and indicated that to maintain the momentum of MPR until inflation subsides. But of course, with a pointer also that they are likely that the Central Bank Monetary Policy Committee is likely in 2025 to reduce interest rate, which would be good news for us anyway. Then the devaluation of the naira and rising import costs have continued to contribute to inflationary pressures, but we remain import dependent for many goods, particularly food and energy. Of course, the energy side is changing gradually, especially when you look at, white products, as we call them. Of course, expanding non-oil revenue with tax reforms, agri exports, improved tax compliance. We may see oil revenue also expand especially relative to where we were some 11, 12, 13 years ago. I recall I served on the Presidential Committee in 2010, 2011. And when it came to this nexus between oil and non-oil revenue, what we found was that non-oil revenue was 150% of the recorded spending of the federal government of Nigeria. And we said one of the key ways strategically to get out of this is to match non-oil revenue with recurrent expenditure and work on this over a number of years to make them equal. Once they are equal, we remove the vulnerability of Nigeria to vagaries of the oil market. We are looking at maybe this budget, we start that process that we recommended then, but our government of the day could not execute. At least we've had 2 administrations between then and now. Then, of course, continue intervention in critical production sectors and enhance coordination between fiscal and monetary authorities. And that is where the real major challenge is currently. We need to spend fiscal in order to stimulate economic activities, but at the same time, monetary authorities are worried about inflationary pressures that can trigger. So while one is pulling back, the other one is revving the engine. So the challenge then is how to enhance the coordination. Now, also, this is where it should be of interest to you. What are the key areas of priority? It's mentioned in the budget: infrastructure, security, and social programs. I will give a simple illustration here. A couple of years back, not too long ago, one of the major cement manufacturing entities in Nigeria invited me to their strategy meeting to talk about the budget and what we are dealing with today, opportunities. And I said, well, for you, because you produce cement. Cement is used primarily in construction of buildings and also now in construction of roads. So in looking at the budget, therefore, for your entity, let's go to the detailed appropriation bill as it was then, just like today. Now, look at all the infrastructure projects and any building construction project in that. All of those, let's aggregate. That gives you an idea of what the budget is about that impacts your own business. So the question is, where are those projects likely to be? Which MDAs, that is ministry departments and agencies of government, are in charge of this? So how do you forge a relationship with them before the budget is finally processed by the National Assembly and then signed into law by Mr. President, and now execution begins? So that means you don't need to wait until the budget becomes law. This is the time to pay and analyze the appropriation bills. See the aspects of the allocation that connect to your own business. And then you begin the process of forging relationships with those entities. That means you are tracking where the money is going, so that by the time the money are being released for those projects and those activities, you are already in a relationship. I can take a portion of it. So about 34.4%, as I said earlier on, of the budget is earmarked for capital expenditure. And that's the way we normally deal with that when we are looking for opportunities. The health, education, and social welfare programs likely to be prioritized to enhance human capital development and reduce poverty. Defense and security, of course, to receive substantial funding to combat terrorism, insurgency, and other security threats. And of course, agri spending. So now, these are the key areas of spending. So obviously, when you look at this budget, the allocations are driven by needs-based assessments and also guided by the renewed hope agenda, which means how do we enhance efficiency, then how do we impact in resource utilization? So in which case, focus now is to shift to tighter fiscal discipline to achieve sustainable growth, which I mentioned earlier on. So looking forward and thinking forward, what do we expect and what should we do? And I picked on this, that prediction is very difficult, especially about the future. It's a statement credited to Neil Bohr, all right? But these are the things that will drive the expected growth: large, useful, and rapidly growing population, rapid urbanization, deepening internet penetration. Of course, the fact that early density in Nigeria is still high, all right? Nigeria ranking 11th globally in terms of access to internet. We are ranked 7th in the world. because 84% of Nigerians access the internet on their mobile devices. So all of this, what do they imply for your business? Exchange rates, you can see their budget assumption. Significant utterance at some point, 1,250. So now, mentioned there are a number of other things that can shape the business environment. So where do we expect to end this year in terms of growth of the economy, in terms of inflation rate, in terms of exchange rate, and of course, lending rates and the place of digitalization? These are our own forecast in BA Consult as to where the economy will go at the end of this year and in 2025. If this budget is passed as presented by the executive, the president will make, I think tomorrow now, where I'm in a time zone where we are still, okay, we are in the same day now, we are in Tuesday. I'm just 6 hours behind. Now, these are the expectations in terms of what we think will happen in 2025. Now, let me conclude this way. Now, words without actions are the assassins of idealism. Why do I always put this forward to CEOs? It is to make us realize that it is important to always act on those initiatives you have agreed as your strategic focus for the coming year 2025. So what I now said there is that whatever government spends on, as I said earlier on, creates either immediate opportunities for businesses or secondary opportunities. For example, in BA Consult, we don't usually do business with government, but we do business with those who do business with the government. In which case, the opportunities we look out for are secondary. So it is either what your business enterprise does has a direct bearing to those allocations in the budget, or where they are not directly having a bearing with those allocations. Then you want to focus on those who actually will do business with them. Then let your research and strategy teams pair the detailed appropriation bill. Identify the opportunities for your sector to start with, and then ask yourself, what do we need to do in my own enterprise in order to expropriate those opportunities? And this is the final slide I have. Don't think outside the box. For me, that is an old way of thinking. Rather, what you should do is think what to do with the following boxes. What needs to change in the way you do business, your strategy? The what, the why, how, for whom, where, and when. What needs to change in your business model? How do we make money? In which case, the choices we have made in strategy, how do we make money? By executing them. What do we need in terms of resources? Whom do we need in terms of relationships? And then how do we organize ourselves? And policies, procedure, business processes, and daily practices. Now, when we do this in the light of what this budget implies for the business environment, we should find our entity better off than where we are at the end of 2024. Thank you so very much. I will stop sharing my slides now, and then we can subsequently take conversations on this if time permits.
Thank you so very much, Doctor. Thank you so very much, Doctor.
Yes.
You have done what doctors do, diagnose the issues and all of that. My key takeaway: words without actions, assassinations of idealism. We had actually paused down a very important aspect of this discourse, and that was remarked by the Registrar and Chief Executive of CIPM. I believe she was trying to join a network at the phone. I wonder if she's around. Madam Registrar, please, you do have the floor for some brief remarks. The Registrar CIPM, please. While waiting for her, I just want to recognize and appreciate the team from CIPM that have actually joined us. A while ago, I saw Malam Ahmed Gubio, CIPM, the president of the institute, and several other respected people from CIPM. Madam, you have the floor.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning,
I'm the president of NECA, Dr. Ifeanyi Okoye, the vice president of NECA, Mrs. Oyemika Adeboye, The second Vice President of NECA, Mr. Goran Sladik. The Treasurer of NECA, Mr. Richard Aibiowu. The Director General of NECA, Mr. Adewale Smart Oyeride, MCIPM. The President and Chairman of the Governing Council of CIPM, Malam Ahmed Ladan Gubril, FCIPM, FNLI. The Vice President, Mrs. Chidima Obejesi, FCIPM. The National Treasurer, Mrs. Ogochukwu Egbuonu, FCIPM. The immediate past President, Mr. Olusegun Mojid, FCIPM, FNLI. Distinguished members of the Council present on this call, members of CIPM and NECA, professional colleagues, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen, good morning to you all. My name is Oluwatoyin Naiwo, FCIPM Registrar Chief Executive for the Chartered Institute of Personnel Management of Nigeria. It's truly an honor to be here today at the 2024 CEO's Discourse event, an extraordinary collaboration between CIPM, that's the Chartered Institute of Personnel Management of Nigeria, and the Nigerian Employers Consultative Association, NECA. If you're wondering how these two professional institutes came together, the answer is simple. We're both experts at managing people. But today, we're here to tackle something far more complex than HR policies, the future of Nigeria's economy. As we look forward to 2025, we find ourselves discussing budget, taxation, and regulations. Now, I know those words can make even the most seasoned professional break into a sweat. I'm actually breaking into a sweat. Budget, taxation, regulations. It's almost like the HR version of the Three Little Pigs. But the reality is, the decisions we make today on these issues will shape the future of our businesses, our livelihoods, and dare I say, our own HR strategies. But let's face it, if we can navigate these challenges, managing the intricacies of employee performance reviews will feel like a walk in the park. At CIPM, we understand that HR is not just about managing people, it is about anticipating change and adapting to it. Much like the regulations we're here to discuss today, and which conversation has already started with Dr. Adedipe's presentation, HR needs to be flexible, responsive, and occasionally capable of interpreting the fine print. Our role is to guide organizations through the maze of economic change, and that's exactly what we're doing with this collaboration with NECA. Often, we talk about taxation, we're all concerned about deductions, but today, I hope we'll be deducting some valuable insights for the future instead. As for regulations, well, they may seem daunting, but as business leaders, we have to learn, and we have learned to embrace them, knowing that sometimes the key to success is simply reading between the lines. On behalf of CIPM, I extend my gratitude to everyone who made today's event possible, NECA and team, CIPM and team, our guest speakers, our facilitators, our panel of discussants, thank you. We're here to help shape a future that is not only sustainable, but also profitable. And if that future comes with a few more incentives and fewer regulations, I think we'd all be happy. I look forward to the engaging conversations ahead, the laughs, because I'm sure there'll be a few, and the collective wisdom we'll all take away today. Thank you, and here is to a successful and enriching session. May our budget be balanced, our taxes fair, and our regulations, well, let's just say manageable. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, my registrar. Thank you so much. Again, on behalf of the NECA family, we welcome the CIPM team, from the President, Council members, and everyone. I also want to use the opportunity to recognize some council members of NECA that are on this call. Madam Rosemary Onolaja, Mr. Adebayo, Mr. Muyiwa Adebayo, and Mr. Lanti. Others will be recognized as they are here. One of the very last remarks that the registrar of CIPM did, she talked about regulations. And I'm wondering, what will regulation of Nigeria look like in the year 2025 and beyond? Please let me yield the floor to the PEBEC team to lead discussions on this. On this note, I would like to call on Ms. Aimaya Okpebolo to please take over from this point. Your time card starts now. Can you note you have 20 minutes? 20 minutes. Over to you. It appears that you are muted, madam.
Thank you so much, Mr. Thompson. Thank you for having me in the session. Just to first off confirm, okay, let me put on my video. Good morning, everyone on this call. Thank you for having me in this session. Just to confirm if you can see my screen, having some difficulty trying to share screen. But can you see my screen, please?
See your screen, confirm.
All right.
Confirmed.
All right, thank you very much. So my name is Aimaya Okpebolo. I'm the project manager at the PEBEC Secretariat. I supervise the reforms across work streams at the Secretariat. I'll just go straight to my presentation. Sorry, like the first speaker, I'll have to stop my video to avoid distractions. I'll just go straight to my presentation since I have limited time. So I'll be talking about PEBEC, improving business regulations and beyond. Just to say that I'll give a brief history of what we do at the PEBEC, or a brief overview of what we do at the PEBEC and how we track MDAs in terms of in the regulatory space, and what is our outlook for 2025, what we're hoping to achieve in 2025. Starting with the PEBEC mandate, the PEBEC was established in 2016 with the dual mandate of removing bureaucratic and legislative constraints to doing business, as well as improve the perception about ease of doing business in Nigeria. The council is composed of His Excellency, the Vice President, as the chair, and has the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, the head of the Civil Service of the Federation, 18 honorable ministers, the governor of CBN, representatives from the National Assembly, Judiciary, and States governments as members, while the special advisor to the President on PEBEC and investment serves as the secretary to the council. As a secretariat, which is the operational arm of the council, we collaborate with all arms of government, that is the other arms of government, the National Assembly, the Judiciary, subnational governments, organized private sector, the diplomatic core development partners like the World Bank, civil society groups, to drive our reforms. Now, what you see on your screen is a snapshot of the MDAs we work with in driving and implementing regulatory subnational reforms across the country. So we ensure that these agencies implement reforms that will enable the regulatory space in Nigeria serve the public better. And we do this as the PEBEC Secretariat through our 5 major work streams. We have the regulatory, innovation, and technology work stream, our subnational work stream, legislative and judicial work stream, strategic communications, and our new business champions program. But our focus today, it's going to be on our regulatory space. So I won't be going through other what the other work streams do. On your screen, sorry, it's some of the reforms that PEBEC has implemented since 2016. And these reforms are not exhaustive. We've had starting the business, enforcing contract, which was one of our World Bank doing business reforms. Of course, we also developed our whole homegrown reforms such as trading within Nigeria, getting electricity, visa on arrival. This was within our regulatory reforms. We had other reforms which have been successfully deployed, the legislative reforms, such as the Credit Reporting Act. We collaborated with the National Assembly in driving these reforms. Our Business Facilitation Miscellaneous Provisions Act, that was a major landmark reform for us at the PEBEC Secretariat. And then we also have our judiciary reforms where we partner with states to drive the establishment and operationalization of small claims courts, which are fast-track courts that sit over commercial disputes of not more than 5 million naira. Then for our subnational reforms, we have our World Bank State Action on Business Enabling Program, and then the establishment of Ease of Doing Business Councils at the subnational level. So like I said earlier, my focus is on our regulatory innovation and technology work stream. So on May 18, 2017, the Executive Order 001 on the promotion of transparency and efficiency in the business environment was issued. This marked a pivotal milestone towards instituting a culture of transparency and efficiency in public service delivery. Now, following the signing of the EO1, the Executive Order 001, the PEBEC commenced tracking of the implementation and compliance of the PEBEC priority MDAs, that's ministries, departments, and agencies, with the directives as contained in the Executive Order 001. So based on the set of established assessment criteria for efficiency and transparency, we monitor the regulatory space across these 4 major areas. That is efficiency, transparency, seaport and airport experience, which is like sector specific to the seaports and the airports. And then our report gov compliance. So how do agencies comply to this platform? I'll speak more on this shortly. Just to say that we have also, based on this Executive Order 001, we now have a report called Transparency and Compliance Report. First of this report was called the Executive Order 001 report earlier, and then it transitioned to Business Facilitation Act compliance reports because the executive order has now been codified in the BFA. And now we have seen the need to rename it Efficiency and Transparency Compliance Report to drive home what we actually do at the PEBEC Secretariat with the MDAs. Now, this report provides an assessment of transparency and efficiency of service delivery across 53 MDAs and also their compliance with the 72-hour timeline for the resolution of complaints on the Report Gov platform. So how do we assess how MDAs meet the criteria set in the report? So we track them through, we track them on how early they submit their reports, the timelines they have said they will achieve in their service level agreement, if they have really met with these timelines, how efficient their report is, and how efficient they have complied with the provisions in the BFA 2022. And then when they send this report to us, we validate the information they give to us through phone calls. We look at the data they've sent to us. We ensure that they are real data from the agencies. It's not like they are falsifying this data. And then we continue to do mystery shopping and stakeholder engagement to assess these reports. And we score the agency based on this set of guide and rules. So just to say, in 2024, we released a half-year report, and we can see that 28 out of the 40 agencies ranked, fifth or scored 50%, which was, an increase in what we have been seeing in the previous years. So just that is how we track in terms of our efficiency and transparency report. Now, we use another tool at the PEBEC Secretariat for the regulatory space, which is the ReportGov. Now, the ReportGov platform is an official public service complaint website. We designed this in 2018, and the Federal Executive Council approved a 72-hour timeline for the resolution of complaints on the ReportGov. It provides an opportunity to channel feedback to the PEBEC on what the PEBEC-focused MDAs are doing in terms of their service delivery. How this is like a flow. This is like the flow of how complaints are received and also resolved at the PEBEC through this ReportGov. So the citizens lodge in their complaints, the PEBEC receives the complaint. At the back end, we have administrators from all the MDAs we are tracking. And so once the complaint is received at the PEBEC Secretariat, we look at the complaints and we are able to decipher the MDA that is responsible for such complaints, and we assign to them, and the agent quickly resolves the complaint within the 72-hour timeline that has been given and approved by the Federal Executive Council. And once this complaint is resolved, the complainant is notified either via email or phone call or, whatever means we are able to reach the complainant. So it's like a GRM, a grievance redress mechanism for citizens in terms of their services from the MDAs. That's another way we have been able to navigate the regulatory space. In February 2024, that's this year, the PEBEC Council held its second meeting, during which the PEBEC Secretariat presented the 2024 Outlook documents that was launched earlier this year. And now at that meeting, His Excellency the Vice President approved and launched our 90-day regulatory reform accelerator with 24 critical ease of doing business reforms to be implemented across 36 agencies and also supervised by 14 ministries. This was it was a very hectic time for us at the PEBEC Secretariat. So what we did was to curate reforms across these specific agencies that will ensure ease of doing business and also improve efficiency and transparency in their service delivery. The 90-day ROA ran from February 20th to June 19. Like I said, it was approved by His Excellency, the Vice President. At the end of the 90-day RRA, just to say that there was an extension of time, it became 120 days because MDAs were really racing to ensure that their reforms were carried out to the full and to ensure that they were able to meet deadlines that we had set for them to complete their reforms. So we had 30 out of the 36 MDAs scoring above 50%. And this was quite impressive because we've never had it at the PEBEC Secretariat where MDAs will be chasing reforms and, progressing well in their reforms. So the key takeaway we learned from that was that leadership matters because we had to use political will to ensure that the heads of the agencies were very much involved in this our acceleration program. So it became even like, heads of agencies trying to, hit the 100% mark before any other, it was like a competition. And this also, in this our regulatory reform accelerator, we learned the key lessons. Another key lesson we learned was that detailed reforms help agencies to implement their mandate. So we developed, at the beginning, we had issues because we could not really get the buy-in of the agencies. They could not understand these reforms. So we had to break it down granular for them and develop detailed actionable steps for them. And this was very easy for them to understand. We at the PEBEC Secretariat, one key slogan we always use is that what gets measured gets done. So tracking was very important. We even made the tracker live. You could see agencies going to the tracker, saying where they are in terms of their reforms and trying to ensure that they hit the 100% mark on time. So that was our key takeaway. And just to say, in February 2025, we're already curating reforms again for the MDAs, and we're going to launch our Regulatory Reform Accelerator 2 or 2.0. Okay, earlier this year, we had this multiple announcements of like policy disruptions in the regulatory space. We had changes in some policies which sparked up some reactions. We had some MDAs releasing policies that caused something like policy flip-flops and uncoordinated announcement of policies and regulations. And that sent mixed signals to the business community, and also rolling back previously hard-earned progress we had made in the ease of doing business space. So following these disruptions, the PEBEC held its inaugural Regulators Forum with His Excellency the Vice President in September 2024. So at the forum, we saw the need to draft a regulatory impact analysis framework. And this framework will help MDAs to systematically assess the potential and positive or negative impact of regulations before they are released to the public. We could see some examples of these policies, like the revised expatriate employment levy, the new national security levy, and most of these policies were suspended, but somehow they create shocks to the regulatory space. So we saw the need for a framework that will help MDAs to be able to release policies that will not have negative impacts in the ease of doing, in terms of ease of doing business. And so just to note that at the PEBEC Secretariat, we have started developing this framework. This is looking into 2025 now. We have started developing this framework. In fact, we have the Vice President approved a technical working group to work on a zero draft that will be shared amongst heads of agencies, and MDAs were asked to collaborate and provide feedback to the PEBEC Secretariat. So this has been done, and we are already finalizing that, and it will be released in 2025. So just to say that in building an effective regulatory impact assessment framework, what we have looked at is that transparency, stakeholder engagement, evidence-based analysis, cost-benefit analysis, flexibility, and continuous improvement are key to the development of an effective regulatory impact assessment framework. So the framework identifies regulatory problems, including inefficiencies, market failure, and new policy targets. We've also looked at the how regulatory needs will transform into concrete policy options. We've gathered relevant data through public consultation. So we did extensive consultation survey. In fact, there's even a survey right now that we have released online for us to get feedback from people based on the draft ROIA we have done. And then the cost benefit, cost effectiveness, or risk analysis. We've considered no policy change scenario. We don't just think that at the PEBEC Secretariat there should be policy changes, except where it is so important to do so. And then identify the most efficient option through assessment of different alternatives. And then we will publish the RIA results to improve transparency of regulatory processes. So this is what we have done at the PEBEC Secretariat. We also have some other work that are ongoing right now. But the release of our 2025 outlook in January, a detailed 2025 work plan will be spelled out. So thank you very much for this session. I will now pause for the time for questions and answers. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Madam. What we will do in terms of questions and answers is we would like everybody that has a question or a comment to kindly drop them in the chat room component of this facility. You have a question, kindly drop it in the chat function, the chat room component of this facility. We're over 160, actually 164 as I'm looking at it. So we won't be able to call one person after the other. But when you drop your questions, it will be directed appropriately. I don't want to say thank you yet because we're still going on to the dialogue, but I'd like to yield the floor to the DG of NECA for 1 or 2 remarks. DG NECA, sir.
Thank you very much, Amea, for the engagement on what PEBEC is doing. Why we might not be able to dig deep into it, but we also don't want to put you on the spot. But we are looking at deepening this conversation on regulation beyond the ongoing engagement we're having with PEBEC, also looking at deepening that engagement next year, because regulation and regulatory activities is probably one of the biggest challenges of the private sector. So we are looking at taking the conversation beyond the policy space to the operation itself. What exactly is the private sector feeling concerning this? Dr. Jumoke, before she moved to the ministry, did quite a lot with us, and we really, the engagement was top notch with PEBEC, and we're hoping that engagement will continue. But without putting you on the spot, we want to sound you out that we'll be reaching out to PEBEC for our employer summit in 2025. The employer summit is probably the biggest advocacy platform for employers in this country. And it's going to hold, the 4th edition is going to hold in June 2025. And regulation is probably one of the key items that will be discussed. So we'll be looking forward to engaging PEBEC or planning that engagement, that regulatory conversation with PEBEC in June next year, so that we can leverage on what PEBEC has done, and then the private sector can bring in its own perspective and its own reality, so that we can align those policy issues with what exactly is happening at the operation level. Because this, we believe, will help PEBEC in making much more progress beyond what is currently making. So we'll be reaching out to PEBEC through you. So we'll make June. That's beyond the ongoing stakeholder engagement that we're having with you. A bigger platform will be the can actually deepen this conversation on regulation and regulatory issues. So thank you, Amea. Thank you very much. Thompson, back to you, please.
Thank you,
Except
sir.
if Amea
Yes,
wants to
noted. No, it's noted. We look forward to hearing from you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
It is said that taxation, thank you. It is said that taxation is as sure as death. Even in the Bible, for those of us that are Christians, you see the component of taxes. And recently in Nigeria, in the past couple of days, weeks, the subject of tax reforms have been in the air and it's still being discussed. The impact implication might not be felt now, but definitely next year. Who feels it? What are the things that we're looking out for? We're going into a 2-in-1 session. What do I mean by 2-in-1? We'll be having 2 gentlemen that will lead discussions on the subject of Nigerian tax reform bills, implication for businesses. Let me start by yielding the floor to a partner in Anderson. So I'd like to invite Mr. Adeyemi Adeniro to lead the discussion on this, Nigerian tax reform. Sir, please, you have 20 minutes and your time starts now.
Yeah, good morning. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning to you, sir.
Thanks for having me. I would go straight to the conversation. I believe everyone can see my slides here. So, like, let me just.
Yes, we can see your slides, sir.
Okay, great. 1 second. Okay, great. So we'll be talking about the Nigerian tax reform bills and the implications for businesses. Just like the anchor has said. I'll be looking at the Nigerian tax system, the Nigerian tax reform bills, and the implication. Right. As we all know, Nigeria operates a decentralized tax system. The tax administration structure cuts across 3 tiers of the government. So you have the federal government, which is managed by the FIRS. The FIRS collects and manages the tax due to the federal government. Then you also have the state government, the taxes that are managed by the State Internal Revenue Service. And then you have the local government, the taxes due to the local governments managed by the Local Government Revenue Committee. This is, as straightforward as this sounds, this is important because in some other countries, the tax system and collection administration is managed actually by one revenue authority. So that affords some seamlessness and efficiency. But we have 3 tiers. Now, going straight to the tax bills that have been proposed by the government currently at the National Assembly for approval, you would, if you go down memory lane, you remember that the Nigerian tax laws had not been revised for a couple of years, up until 2019, where the Muhammad Buhari administration introduced the Finance Act. Now, what the Finance Act had done was to pick several provisions of the tax laws and then amend them. Now, the amendments were significant, and because of the nature of the amendments, it affected affected companies in making plans for subsequent years. When you're making sweeping changes to the tax laws year after year, it affects planning for companies. So what this current administration has done is to say, rather than amend provisions of the tax laws year after year, let's take a holistic view at the tax regime and then make one sweeping, I won't say amendments, and change to the tax laws, and align them with global best practice. So you have 4 bills before the National Assembly. You have the Nigerian tax bill. This really aims to consolidate the Nigerian tax laws. So if you're looking for personal income tax, you won't be looking at Personal Income Tax Act. Then you go back to CGT Act. You have everything in one single document, a Nigerian tax bill that covers all taxes. Then you have the Joint Revenue Board Establishment Bill. Here it seeks to harmonize and the coordination of revenue administration in Nigeria. Since we have these various tiers of government, there needs to be some harmonization and coordination at some level so that it won't have adverse impact on companies. Then you have the Nigerian Tax Administration Bill. This is a separate bill where you find penalties and the time for filing and issues like that. So it provides framework for managing taxes. That's what that is about. Then you have the Nigerian Revenue Service Establishment Bill, majorly reshaping the FIRS to be the Nigerian Revenue Service. And that bill, in essence, replaces the FIRS Establishment Act. So those are the bills in a nutshell. Now, what are the objectives? To consolidate the tax laws, to increase revenue and support growth, to be pro I would say to be pro-business to a large extent, to enhance tax compliance, to make tax compliance easy. You know, research by World Bank has shown that except you hit a tax to GDP ratio of about 15%, you can't really see significant impact of the tax collected on the economy. So Nigerian tax to GDP ratio is about 10% now. So we still have some room for improvements. Improve tax equity to make sure that the rich pay their fair share and the poor amongst us don't have to bother with taxes. Then to modernize tax administration through digitalization. If you go to other African countries, you see some level of digitalization as it relates to tax collection, administration, and simplicity of compliance. I didn't say European countries, I mean just our next door neighbors. You see some level of automation, and these bills seek to provide that framework to achieve that with respect to tax collection and administration. At the end of the day, all of this should expand the tax base so that we all pay our fair share as it relates to taxes. So there are several provisions in the proposed tax bills that impact businesses. I know the conversation that has been in the public space for some time now relates to value-added tax and how it is shared by the various tiers of government. But there are several provisions in those bills that change the face of taxation in Nigeria as it impacts individuals and businesses. And those conversations are not at the front burner. So I will go through some of the provisions in the bills so that we would keep abreast with them. So this amendment to personal income tax actually seeks to increase taxes paid by the rich and exempt the poor from taxes. So essentially, people who earn 800,000 and below per annum will be exempted from taxes, and individuals who earn 50 million and above will have to pay 25% in tax. So you would see that based on this, there would be a significant impact on small and medium scale enterprises, because if you earn less than 800,000, you really don't have to bother paying taxes. That puts more money in your pocket. The threshold based on the previous tax law was about 300,000. So what do companies need to do with respect to this? You have to change your payroll management. You need to update it, you know, to reflect the tax rates if this is passed into law. I'll go to the next one, just to keep to time. Another thing that was changed or proposed in the tax bill is the removal of the consolidated relief allowance. Now, before an individual is taxed of the income he has earned, there are some reliefs that were granted by the existing law. 1% of the gross salary or 200,000, whichever is higher, plus the 20% of the consolidated salary is provided as a relief based on the existing law. Now, the new bill is doing away with all of that and just introducing a rent relief of 200,000 or 20% of annual rent paid, whichever is higher. So that means no matter the rent you pay, you can't get more than 200,000 as a relief. And there is also an introduction that you can't just claim the relief automatically. You have to write to the tax authority to do so. I think I'm hoping that that's writing to the tax authority would probably be simplified and maybe automated in one way or the other. So we go to compensation for loss of office and damages. Capital gains tax is applicable on that. And what the previous bill or the existing law provides is that if you earn 10 million and above with respect to that, you won't be liable to CGT. Now, of course, inflation between the time that law was introduced and now has increased rapidly. So the threshold is being moved from that 10 million to 50 million. But what is important to note is that the rate is also moved from 10% to 27.5% in 2025 and then 25% in 2026. So while the threshold is increased to 50 million, the rate has also been increased from 10% to 27.5 and 25% subsequently. So there's an exemption of capital gains tax on personal assets. Before now, the threshold was about 1,000 in terms of gain when you dispose personal assets, but now it has been raised to 5 million. So if you sell your car, you won't be liable to CGT if there is a chargeable gain of about 5 million. So there is also CGT on disposal of shares. That was introduced by one of the tax bills. Before then, there was no CGT on disposal of shares. So what the new law seeks to do is to increase that threshold for exemption of that CGT from 100 million to 150 million, provided that the gains on that disposal does not exceed 10 million. So what that means is that if you dispose shares and the sales proceeds is 80 million, but the gain is about 30 million, you would have to pay CGT. So you need to combine the effect of the threshold with the gain that you are receiving from the disposal of the shares to determine the exemption. Moving on. There is a redefinition of small company. Before now, small companies, if you have a turnover of less than 25 million, but now that has been, the proposed amendment is increasing that to 50 million, provided you do not have assets above 250 million. So let's say that you have a turnover of 25 million or even 0 million naira because you are in the investment phase of development of that company, but you've invested assets above 250 million, then you would probably be exposed to some minimum tax, as it were, depending on your legal status. There's a proposed change in the tax rates as well. So the tax rates, there's an amendment, a proposal to reduce the tax rates from 30% to 25% eventually in 2026, but 27.5% first in 2025. So the previous segmentation of companies to small companies, medium size, and lower tax and large size companies have been done away with, and what they are looking at is small companies and other companies. So medium-sized companies that their turnover is between 25% to 100%, 25 million to 100 million. The proposal that those will pay tax at 27.5% in 2025. Now, if you notice, right, there seems to be an harmonization of the tax rate, of the income tax rate to 25%. Before now, CGT was 10%. And company income tax was 30%. So taxpayers could play within those two different rates and say, okay, maybe I will structure this transaction so that the gain is not an income chargeable to company income tax, but chargeable to CGT, so that I pay 10% and not 25%. But harmonizing the rate now of CGT and company income tax, the eventual harmonization is to achieve or to take care of that tax planning opportunity of switching from income tax to capital gains tax. So moving on, capital allowance rates. When a company is committing capital allowance, there's an accelerated capital allowance for the first year. So you have what they call initial allowance, then you then have annual allowance. So in the first year, you claim initial and annual. In subsequent years, you claim only annual allowance. So the bills are proposing to do away with initial allowance, meaning that companies will claim less capital allowance in the first year. It doesn't change anything, it's just timing difference. So you won't be claiming as much as you would have claimed in the first year. You just claim the same all through the tax useful life of that asset. So I go to the next one. Exclusion of deduction of royalties, fees, and similar payments of non-residents. Before now, where you have transaction between related parties and a non-resident entity is earning royalties, there was a cap, that relates to 5% of EBITDA based on the transfer pricing regulation. Now, the new laws are doing away with that, saying that if you are paying royalties, you are not able to claim deduction for tax purposes. I think that's really significant and may increase the tax payable for companies. The next proposed amendment is the introduction of minimum tax, or I would say minimum effective tax rate. So what this law this provision seems to want to achieve is to equalize the minimum tax rate, with what is obtained in terms of the global global minimum tax being proposed. So it's proposing an effective tax rate of 15%. So the way the tax law is worded is that if your tax is 2 million, for example, and your effective tax rate is 5%, then what you need to do is to determine the additional tax that you need to pay that will move your effective tax rate from 5% to 15%. Now, in calculating effective tax rates, the provisions of the proposed bill does not provide enough guidance and suggests that the Federal Inland Revenue Service or National Revenue Service, as the case may be, would provide more guidance in that regard. I would expect that all the guidance and all the provisions that relates to that should be put in the law, because that would mean that whatever you do, if your effective tax rate is less than 15%, then you have to pay them. But on this particular slide, I think this relates to foreign subsidiaries of Nigerian companies. So if you have a foreign subsidiary in Ghana, Benin Republic, as it were, and those are not paying enough tax, their effective tax rate is not 15%, the Nigerian company would then have to make do of the difference. The minimum tax, effective tax rate that I talked about is captured in another slide, but it's related to this as well, that the Nigerian company, who is the parent company of a subsidiary that is in another country, would have to make do of whatever shortfall the tax in that company is made. This to avoid profit shifting and base erosion. Yeah, this was what I was referring to. If a company is a member of a multinational group of companies, and if a company isn't a member of a multinational group of companies but has a turnover of 20 billion, then whatever your tax computation is, you have to make sure that your effective tax rate is 15%. I think time is not on my side, but I would run through the other provisions that are of importance. There was a circular that was issued by FRS some years ago that says that if you have two companies that are involved in a merger, that the enlarged company would not be allowed to carry over the tax assets, but will be responsible for the tax liabilities. this law seeks to change that and propose that an enlarged company will be able to carry over both the tax assets and the liability. Tertiary education tax and other levies. You would know that companies are liable to different levies, different taxes as it relates to NIDA, tertiary education tax fund, and all of that. The bill seeks to consolidate all of that to 4% tax and eventually reduce all of that to 2% that will be payable in respect to the Student Educational Loan Fund. I think this is a very good initiative. What the federal government is seeking to do is that all those agencies that companies have to pay levies to will then be funded through the budget, as opposed to being funded from companies' profit or operations. Now, VAT rates. This was the main conversation with in the public space. The increase of the rates from 7.5% eventually to 15%, a graduated increase to 15%. I would say that the increase in the rates is consistent with what you have in most African countries, where you have an average of 15 to 18% VAT. But what is being proposed here is to increase the rates and reduce and remove the limits in input VAT claim, and also change the exemptions from being exempt to zero rated. So I'll take those three together. The increase in rates, the government seeks to balance that up with an increase in the amount of input VAT that a company can claim. The VAT that is payable to the government is the VAT that the company has charged, less the VAT it has suffered. Now, in the current law, the only VAT that you can claim against the VAT you've charged is the VAT that you've incurred for goods purchased for resale and then goods that are bought for manufacturing purposes. I would say goods that form stock in trades in the production of a new product. So what this is saying is that I'm going to remove that limitation and allow you to claim the input VAT that you've incurred. So even though rate is increasing, the amount of, I would say, relief that you get from input VAT claim is also increasing. So I would say it should balance up at the end of the day. And with the goods being moved from being exempt to zero rated, it also allows them to be able to claim or get a refund for whatever VAT that they've incurred in the manufacture of that products. And this applies to the power industry, education, books and materials, and agricultural seeds. So essentially that's it. Now, another thing the government intends to do is what we call the fiscalization of the VAT filing and collection. In essence, the government seeks to integrate companies' software, accounting software, with their own collection and monitoring software, such that VAT can be monitored in real time. And for me, this would improve collection, but there are concerns with respect to cybersecurity and data privacy. I believe those will be addressed, but this is what is majorly obtainable in many African countries. Now, also the free trade zone, there are some amendments to the free trade zone. Instead of companies being exempted from taxes as it is now, the regime seeks to create a tax credit situation where you would actually have a tax credit as opposed to being exempted. And there's also that 25% maximum threshold to sales in the customs treasury. And it also appears that companies in the free trade zone would also be liable to minimum tax rates provisions. So that kind of restricts the benefits in the free trade zone. Now, lastly, I would say that there's a welcome development, the introduction of the tax ombud. This is more like a tax arbitration system where before you go to the law, the taxpayer can approach the tax ombud. And the tax ombud is an office created by one of the tax bills. The tax ombudsman will be appointed by the federal government, and this office will seek to address grievances related to taxes so that taxpayers and the revenue authority won't have to spend significant amount of time and resources at the courts to resolve tax issues. So that's an overview of the introduction in the proposed bills. One of the changes that I also forgot to mention in relation to capital allowance is that if you don't pay VAT on an asset, you cannot claim that asset as for capital allowance. You cannot, it won't be allowable for capital allowance claim. I think that's also significant to mention. We believe that conversations would continue to go on with respect to the tax bills. It's currently at the National Assembly. We expect some changes on those bills that will accommodate all stakeholders, especially those conversations as it relates to VAT. That brings me to the end of this presentation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so very much. You do deserve a round of applause. And in a relay, you get to the final leg, and the final leg is always the determining factor. So in this relay of discourse, we're on the fourth panelist, and I just want to yield the floor. Still on the same subject, Nigerian tax reform bills, implication for business, probably from the perspective of the private sector companies. I'd like to invite Chairman Finance Committee, NECA, Mr. Olumuyiwa Adebayo. Sir, you have the floor, and 20 minutes. Your time starts now.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, participants, for this opportunity to more or less partake in the discourse. Again, I will be more or less building or continuing from where my brother Adedino stopped, my professional colleague, and we'll be looking at it from the angle of the pros and the cons, and from the angle of what impacts it may obtain for organizations. And since we are more or less talking to CEOs, they need to more or less keep themselves abreast along with their team of these developments. Now, what is before us, which is going to be much more encompassing come 2025, are the 4 bills that technically we revolutionize the tax system or the fiscal system as a whole. Okay, but again, question has equally been raised that tax reform is a component of the fiscal policy reform. And some has also made some arguments, validly or otherwise, that what happens to aspect of fiscal discipline from the government with respect to government expenditure. I think today, they've more or less laid before us the budgets of 2025 and what impact it has. Therefore, part of the reform also is expected to touch fiscal discipline and government expenditure. Likewise, government borrowing. Okay, but the 4 bills that we are looking at here, I think more or less touch much more on tax impact to individuals, to businesses, and also talks about much more about the administration of it and our revenue that are accrued from the tax is to more or less impact or positively affect the government, the 3 tiers of government, that's the federal, the state, and the local government. But again, I reiterate for the last time that the 4 bill comprises of the Nigerian tax bill, the Nigerian tax administration bill, the Nigerian Revenue Service Establishment Bill, and likewise the Joint Revenue Board Establishment Bill. Now, to equally summarize what we could see or what we could say about this bill. Okay, again, emphasis has been made that this tax bill, especially the Nigerian tax bill that consolidate and harmonize the major taxes in Nigeria into a single digit, it's not necessarily to more or less focus on government revenue, but much more to provide support to businesses, which is the intention primarily is to promote businesses, productivity within the economy, which could also guarantee survival of businesses and also probably bring in more of foreign direct investment, as the case may be. But again, there's nothing that has its own positive that doesn't have its own cons or limitations. Okay, and we are going to be looking at both and speaks to it directly from the business angle. Okay, again, I'll reiterate that the aim of the bill, once again, is to consolidate various legal frameworks in relation to the taxation in Nigeria, both taxation of individuals, trusts, companies, and the like. And also is to ensure that the burden of tax is not just on existing taxpayers, but rather to expand the tax base within the country, so that those that are not in the tax net are equally in the tax net. And I think that presupposes that much of what they will do is to use technology and financial inclusion to arrive at that. Another thing that the bills tends to protect to us is enhanced tax compliance and equally address complexities in the current tax system. But again, that doesn't stop government also in enhancing its revenue stream on a sustainable basis. Okay, which means invariably all of this will also boost government revenue, but with the expectation that it's not going to put more burden to existing taxpayers, but rather once the economy bounce back, there's more productivity, more income, and therefore there'll be more taxes, and eventually try to eliminate multiplicity of taxes. But again, let us look at the current development and tractions from what I've summarized as a thought or line of thought, and also as a follow-up on the presentation that has been made. Okay, the first one I will look at also borders on the fiscal policy and tax reform. Now, if you look at the current administration for fiscal policy, initiative include the tax reform aimed at probably broadening the tax base, enhancing compliance, and optimizing collection. Now, some of those key developments follow up on the Finance Act that has equally tried to bring us to speed changes in our tax regimes. But again, the current administration is looking at rejigging it as a whole rather than creating distortion on a yearly basis by way of Finance Acts. Now, but again, there are issues that are raging based on the introduction of these four bills, probably because it's first time probably in the history of Nigeria where we might be having significant drift or changes or paradigm shift in our fiscal space, whereby we're having four bills at the same time, which follow up on some of the amendments or regulations that we've done over time with respect to VAT notification order and also to withholding tax regulation that has been done most recently. And therefore, this has probably provided phobia and concern to Nigerians. These concerns are probably genuine on the premise that there have been about 3 significant reforms that has taken place in the last few months. I think we are aware of the removal of fuel subsidy. We are equally aware of the limitation of exchange rate and also the issue of partial removal of subsidy on energy. And all of these have probably brought some level of strain on businesses and even individuals, so that disposable income has been reduced. And therefore, people have genuine phobia that bringing this also on board within the space of 12 months may probably trigger further challenges within the economy. But again, when you look at it, the true intent and purpose of these bills is to re-energize the economy, okay? Is to enhance productivity, is to support business as far as practicable, if the spirit of what has been drawn in these bills are actualized. Because we are all aware that implementation is always the major challenge, not the policy framework in most cases, and not the laws in most cases, but how we implement it. And therefore, we believe that with this wider consultation, wider awareness and concerns, we believe that all persons, agencies, institutions will have to more or less come to the floor to encourage how implementation will not be the bane of this tax regime. Now, again, we then speak to the fact that all of our efforts currently is to ensure that governments harmonize taxes across tiers and across agencies, so that all regulatory agencies are no longer revenue collection agencies, because what that presupposes is that it creates more bottlenecks for businesses, because all of those agencies are trying to maximize their revenue in order to stay afloat. And therefore, all of this brings about more of bottlenecks within it. Therefore, the concern that has been raised over time, which also we expect the bills to address, and if they have not been addressed, is for us to equally point those things out over time, is issue of multiplicity of taxes. Even though amidst this bill, since the committee has started, we have also seen situations whereby additional tax and levies are equally being introduced, probably at state or at even some agency level. Therefore, I think we believe that government needs to address that with more or less strong will, so that people can have the trust on whatever government says, and also to further ensure that compliance burden is reduced, so that we are not audited in such a way that it becomes another level of challenges to businesses. Because if you look at over the past years, due to various kind of audits in terms to guarantee compliance, sometimes you hear things like monitoring, you hear things like desk review, audit, investigation back, and also things from the same agency, and state also carry out their own. You find out that many businesses continue to welcome tax officers virtually every day, if not every week of the year. And at the end of the day, all of this does not necessarily contribute towards productivity, rather it serves as challenge and bottlenecks. And what recommendation do we believe that government needs to do for us to actualize what the intent and purposes of those bills are, is to rejuvenate and reimagine our economy, is that these frameworks or these bills must more or less have the spirit and the letters of simplification of our tax framework. Therefore, we must also ensure that further on, there must be harmonization of tax collection processes across the federal, the state, and local government, so as to reduce duplication and enhance compliance. And like the other presenter has made known to us, is that in most jurisdictions, probably developed jurisdiction, there's a single revenue agency in which whatever they collect is not distributed across the value chain. But in our own, we probably have a revenue agency delineated along with the tiers of government. And even within each tier, we still have some other revenue generating agencies in that case. Therefore, we also look at how do they broaden the tax base, which means the concern of every businesses in Nigeria is that government should not put more burden on existing businesses. Rather, government should bring those that are not in the net to the net. And that speaks to certain things that probably I'm going to mention at a later. And therefore, also we believe that there should be extensive stakeholders engagement beyond what we've done. Again, we'll appreciate that the Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reform has continuously engaged, But again, this engagement must be so in-depth and should be something that is more or less embraced by all of us in the organized private sector, most especially the executives. Because what we have seen over time is that most of the executives send foot soldiers just to participate, and the level of contribution is not more or less in-depth, or probably the response they get back from the consultation is not more or less put to fusion. But we believe that going forward, we need to embrace this kind of engagement. And I think another one is coming up on Friday in Man House, that's Manufacturing Association of Nigeria House, around 10 o'clock in the morning, in which the chairman and members of the committee will equally be having additional stakeholders engagement. Now, again, from all what we've seen, I'm now going to reel out some of the benefits that we believe the organized private sector will derive, and likewise some of the limitations that we need to work on and we need to more or less advocate on as we have opportunity of engaging with the policymakers. Now, one of those benefits is that the laws are now going to be well simplified, as you can see in some of the presentations and the documents that have been provided by the committee of the government. Also, improve in certainty, reduced multiplicity of taxation, even though it has not been fully eradicated. There will be much more increased intensity that is targeted at productivity rather than those general incentives. And therefore, compliance is expected to improve and administration burden is expected to reduce. And we expect to see more of transparency in the tax administration, since there will be more of fiscalization, introduction of technology, and also the establishment of the tax ombudsman. Also, we expect that all of this will incentivize investment, probably bring in foreign direct investment if government is able to gain the trust from the wider economy and investors. Also, there will be certainty to the degree of amount of tax I need to pay, even though there are still some gray areas which I'm going to mention. Okay, from what we have also seen, it's likely going to bring about ease of cross-border transaction, since there have been some clarity as it relates to cross-border transaction. And we also look at situations whereby better dialogue will be more or less provided. Before now, the tax officials or the tax authorities see themselves as alpha and omega. But with the introduction of the tax ombudsman, it then means you have a layer before you even try to challenge at the tribunal. And we presume, according to what has been structured, that the tax ombudsman will be totally independent of the tax authorities, such that whatever decision or recommendation from there may be adjudged to be fair by all parties. And also there's likelihood that there will be less dispute and litigation, since some of the ambiguities in the tax laws have been eradicated. And also there are sectoral incentives, which means some of these bills are probably targeted at industries that can facilitate and energize our economy, as the case may be, most especially in renewable energy, in manufacturing, and also in agriculture. These are this IT industry. Okay, and also the mechanism for tax reform is robust, which makes it far possible in today's world that we will be getting much of the time tax reform as against what we don't have access to in the past. Now, also to the SMEs, which is within the organized private sector, is that most of the SME business will equally be exempted from tax, provided they meet the threshold. But again, the threshold is put at about 50 million, but we believe that that threshold can equally be increased, because in today's money terms, the purchasing power of this 50 million is far, far lower than the purchasing power of that 25 million when it was 25 million, which means we believe that if at least the government can look at it and probably increase it to about 100 million threshold. Okay, also there's some level of simplification in tax compliance for SMEs and the likes, but again, I believe government need to support SME with some of technology that they can more or less subscribe to at little or no cost, which may be cloud-based, in order to bring them into the four walls. Because one of those limitations we're going to see later on is how do we effectively execute the fiscalization with the SMEs with respect to technology, because it could be possible with the big companies who are on ERPs, but most SMEs are probably on ledgers that are manual ledgers or on Excel or on some accounting applications that may not be compatible for integration purposes to actualize the fiscalization. Therefore, some of these are the benefits. But again, this benefit comes at some bottlenecks or limitations, as case may be. Now, with all of this, we still expect that government needs to look at how to fully eliminate multiplicity of taxation, provided some agencies will still, in one way or the other, be collecting revenue, may suggest that this objective of eliminating multiple taxes may not be achieved easily the way we expected it. And also, we need to also revisit and make it clear within the Act by delineating at what point is tax audit carried out, at what point is tax monitoring exercise carried out, and on what are they carried out, what kind of documentation requests can be made, so that there is no situation where, as you're attending to debt audit, you're attending to monitoring exercise, one is coming from Abuja, one is coming from the region, one is coming from the local tax offices. All of these are things that we need clarity more on, and let it be specific. And also, we still have some level of unpredictability within our tax environment. Frequent changes in the law create uncertainties, and also issue of creating law in retrospective is also dangerous for the economy, and it's also breed trust. We can find that in what happened when the issue of windfall tax was introduced. Okay, even if we presume that windfall tax is validly a tax, I believe probably it should be forward-looking rather than backward, which then means that the confidence of the investing public will be reduced, where you can predetermine if government, in the bit of raising revenue, can always come retroactively to charge you tax on what was not there. And we need to remember that one of the maxims of effective tax system everywhere is issue of certainty of taxes, which means before I go into transaction, I need to know what is the tax burden, and not when I enter transaction, tax burden is not coming up after the fact. We need to look at that. Also, we need to address issue of the implementation gap, issue that may be unexpected with respect to poor coordination between tax authority, which can bring about delay in realization of the promised reform. Okay, and we also need to look at issues about technology readiness gap. Now, I think the speaker before me has more or less emphasized. Now, if you look at this reform, we have not focused much more on technology and the cost implication for businesses. Now, for you to comply with some of this provision, you then need to change your processes at least, and most times you need to use technology to aid that change. Therefore, technology will come at a cost, and it also has its own time in development. Some architecture might be changed, most especially when it comes to VAT delineation. Okay, the burden from the administration has been put on taxpayers, companies, that upon remitting VAT, they must appropriately separate those VAT into states that those VAT is being to have derived from. But the problem there also is that if by mistake or as a result of the fact that you don't have a report system, you have wrongly delineated or failed to delineate and you have filed and remitted the tax, once such is discovered and there is an issue arising from it, you will also be punished by way of penalty on such, and it then becomes additional burden on businesses. How long period will you give for businesses to redefine the systems their processes, acquire technology if possible, or with government be providing technology through the fiscalization system that can easily aid businesses in delineating these VATs from the point of consumption. That also is a critical thing that we need to take into consideration vis-a-vis other changes that may require change in our system. For example, for payroll system, for people that use payroll system, how would they have to change those payroll systems to address the new development? What is government providing in terms of timeline in doing this and in terms of support? All of this is more or less critical for us to look into. Now, on that premise, we then need to now look at some critical aspects. One of those critical aspects is this, the minimum tax rate, or what we call the effective tax rate that need to be considered. Now, first, there was no definition or clear definition of what the basis of that effective tax rate will be. The question then is, effective on what? 50% of what? Is it on my profit before tax? And if you say it's my profit before tax, what happened to items that naturally are exempted from tax that constitute part of that profit before tax? Are we taking that into consideration? What happened to unrealized gains and losses that are embedded or included in arriving at that profit before tax? What happened to investment income that are considered to be final tax? For example, the frank investment income like dividend, that the withholding tax suffered on it is deemed to be the final tax, but the dividend income is accounted for in arriving at profit before tax. What happened to that? All of this have to be taken into consideration with clarity to define and not to leave it in the hand of FRS to determine what constitutes the basis of that effective tax. We need to look at that critically, even though government have the genuine reason for ensuring that the effective tax is not below 15% in order to hint towards the global minimum tax rate as proposed and agreed upon by the OECD and the member countries. And I think we need to look at that vis-a-vis other developments that are more or less coming up. Okay, another challenge we also look at is the issue of threshold that have been set. Now, the threshold that has been set is considered to be 20 billion naira. Now, the question then is, this issue of this effective tax of 15% is more or less drawn from the global minimum tax provision, Pillar 2 of the OECD. We then speak to the fact that even the Pillar 2 of the OECD consider a threshold of businesses that more or less are involved in, or they are part of a multinational enterprise, which is M&A, and of which, as at that point in time, the turnover is at least about 750 million euro. Now, when you look at 750 million euro, in Nigeria equivalent amount today, if you consider at rate of 1,800, that means you are talking about 1.3 trillion approximately. And the question then is, how come the threshold we have adopted seems to be extremely low and not reflection of what the international, more or less, consideration has been? Which means even if we are to introduce this, and we are not limiting it only to MNAs, we are now extending it to every business that have at least a turnover of 20 billion. Therefore, why then can't we change the threshold to something more realistic? Because in today's world, merely having a turnover of 20 billion may not guarantee effective profit because the purchasing power of Naira today is extremely low. All of these are things that we need to take into consideration. And for short, these are just what I've more or less penciled down as considerations that we all need to more or less buckle our shoes for us to further engage and effectively involve in advocacy and effectively restructure our processes and plan our taxes against the future. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Let me just re-echo one of the things he said. And it's one of the things that the DG NECA had actually posted on the platform. The chairman of the Presidential Committee on Fiscal and Tax Reform will be having a meeting with the organized private sector this week, Friday, 20th December 2024 at Man House, 77 Awolowo Road. The time is 10 a.m. Is there because the organized private sector is made up of NECA, MAN, NASI, NASIMA, and the others. And currently the secretary of the OPS is with MAN. So we had all come together and said, please come and talk to us. We need to engage more. So please make it a date this week. I recognize my council member and chairman of the legal committee, Mr. Waboil. I agree to sir. I also recognize I don't do a past chairman of our HR committee, a council member in NECA, and he wears several caps. I just want to recognize the presence of Mr. Victor Bulajolo that is with us in this committee on this call, Mr. Victor Bulajolo, FCIPM. Thank you so very much. Talking about CIPM, I think I would just want to yield the floor this time. It's just the appropriate time for me to welcome the president, the current president of CIPM, for some interventions on this subject matter. And respectfully, I want to yield the floor to the president of CIPM, Malam Ahmed Ladan Dubio, FCIPM, for his intervention. My president, sir, please, you have the floor. Kindly unmute, sir. The president CIPM, kindly unmute, sir. You have the floor.
Trying to unmute. Can you unmute him, please? Can you unmute him, please?
Okay.
Please unmute him.
Yeah, I'm doing that.
Thank you.
Okay, unmute Ahmed Gubio, CIPM president, please. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Please, you have the floor, sir.
Okay.
Sorry for that bridge. Okay, from your end, kindly unmute. Yes.
Sorry, can you hear the president now?
Hello, can you hear me now?
I can hear you, sir. I can hear you, sir. I can hear you, sir. Please, you have the floor. Thank you, sir. You may wish to use your camera or
I'm
as you
assuming
deem
that
fit.
everyone can hear me.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon to all our distinguished guests and panelists. Permit me to please stand on the already established protocols. We have had a very thought-provoking journey with this session today. We have peeled the layers of budgeting, taxation, and regulations, uncovering, of course, their critical role in shaping the trajectory of our economy. Let me begin by extending our profound gratitude to all our esteemed speakers who have inspired us with their thoughts about the pathway to progress. Your enriching perspectives have been like beams of light, of course, cutting through the fog of uncertainty. You all did not just inform us today, you inspired us to think bigger and even aim higher. I therefore thank you for your interventions. Today, we have discussed the pillars that form the bedrock of our economic structure. And we have uncovered some critical truths. While budgets may not necessarily captivate people like Afrobeats or High Life will do, I dare say that taxes may also feel like relative who shows up at every family event uninvited. And to some of us, we see regulations, as complex as navigating the Lagos traffic with Google Maps. However, without all of this, our economy will be like a vehicle speeding across the third mainland bridge without brakes at all. That, we all agree, will be very chaotic. It will also be risky and ultimately, of course, unsustainable. The 2023 budget, 2025 budget standing tall at a 21.83 trillion with a deficit of 10.8 trillion. It reminds us that a budget is not just about numbers. It is a statement of priorities. It is also a vision of what we value and where we aspire to go. How we turn this deficit into sustainable growth demands bold and innovative thinking. We all must agree that the difficulty is definitely not in developing new ideas, but it is, of course, in escaping old ones. With Nigeria's GDP to tax ratio, if I hear our speakers correctly, standing at just 6% compared to a global average of 15%. It is like going to a buffet and leaving half of the food untouched. I ask us all to imagine the possibilities if we maximize this potential. I'm sure we all will agree that we will have better infrastructure, a stronger workforce, and a thriving business ecosystem. When it comes to regulations, we have made strides, but there's still a long road ahead of us. Our country's GDP of $502 billion reminds us of our potential. That we are not just on the cusp of greatness, we are staring at it in the face. Let me speak to the most vital element of it all, which is the people. It is often said that behind every successful economy is a skilled and motivated workforce. For us at CIPM, we believe that investing in people is the ultimate currency of progress. The workforce must be empowered, reskilled, and of course, prepared to tackle challenges head on. So this is not just about compliance with existing regulations, but it's more about future-proofing our talent, of course, for a rapidly evolving global marketplace. To echo Albert Einstein, he said that in the middle of difficulty lies opportunities. We at CIPM will therefore ask that we all look at these challenges not as roadblocks, but as stepping stones for transformation. And here is a little food for thought for all of us. If taxes and budgets were like school subjects, we might all be sitting in the back of the class, trying to avoid the teacher's glare. But like every determined Nigerian student, the secret to navigating this cusp is in doing our homework, asking the top questions, and of course, being bold enough to rewrite the rules for success. Budgeting, taxation, and even regulations may appear as challenges. But we must also see them as opportunities in disguise. Opportunities to redefine our economic priorities, to transform policies into progress, and of course, to build a nation where businesses and people rise together. In closing, let me thank our partners, NECA, for putting this discourse together. This collaboration has been like a fine wine. It just keeps getting better with every event. Who would have thought that taxation and regulations would spark such engaging and lively discussions? With this collaboration, we have proven once again that when great minds come together, meaningful dialogue follows. Let us do this more often, because as they say, if you want to go fast, go alone. Or if you want to go far, go together. Thank you once again, NECA, for this beautiful collaboration. Thank you, our distinguished speakers, and thank you for all that have joined this call today. Together, we can achieve a lot more. Thank you all very much for the opportunity to make this intervention. Thank you. Over to you, Thompson.
Thank you, sir. We do appreciate. Thank you so very, very much. I could hear my CIPM president actually sending words of the intervention there. Now the floor is open for questions and interaction. And I've checked through the chat room, and there are only 2 questions. Interestingly, one of the panelists is saddled with answering the 2 questions. One of the questions on the chat room, the second one was sent to me on my WhatsApp. And let me read the one on the chat room. It's from Abayomi Oyelola. It says, what is PEBEC doing? What is PEBEC doing about export processing in terms of timelines and multiple regulators that serve as pushback to any reforms? I take that again. What is PEBEC doing about export processing in terms of timelines and multiple regulators that serves as pushback to any reforms? While waiting for the lady from PEBEC to throw more light on that, please keep the questions coming. I would like to appeal to all the speakers or the faculties. Kindly share your presentation, because one of the things that members on this call or participants on this call have actually requested for are copies of those presentations so we could share with them. My sister from PEBEC, are you still with us? Yes, please.
Yes, thank you so much.
The first one, yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Thompson. So in response to that question, sorry, I even missed the question. I didn't even know it was in the chat box. But I'll say that PEBEC has initiated reforms to streamline Nigeria's export processes. And the aim is to reduce timelines, also to address challenges posed by multiple regulatory agencies. Some of these initiatives are the digitization of export procedures. We've also have on port reforms and regulatory streamlining at the ports. We've had multiple engagements where we have advocated for this streamlining of regulators at the ports. Also, we're collaborating with the Nigerian Ports Authority. And then, so we are developing a model actually to ensure that these reforms are effectively implemented. Recently, as the DG of NECA had said, the current Minister of Industry and the current Minister of Trade and Investment had this session with exporters. So it was a session that was jointly designed by the ministry and the PEBEC. So there's an active collaboration to deep dive into identified pain points of exporters. So we had this ministerial consultation, which was recently hosted in Lagos, and we have identified the concerns at the forum, and we are currently distilling this concerns into next actionable steps towards providing resolutions. So it's still a work in progress. Earlier in my presentation, I also stated that we have this Business Champions Program, PEBEC Business Champions Program. Through that program, we have been able to identify the pain points also of exporters. It's a work in progress. The work stream was launched this year. So we are having engagements. Engagements are still ongoing to understand these pain points with exporters. And then there's also the single window project by the president. PEBEC is a member of that committee. On the single window, and in fact, they are really leveraging on the past work PEBEC has done in terms of advocacy for the national single window. So these are, multifaceted approaches that we are using to ensure that we address all these challenges in terms of timelines and multiple regulations faced by exporters. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. But before you go, the other question that came into my WhatsApp was, what's the update on the proposed Omnibus Bill 2.0?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. So the Omnibus Bill process is still ongoing. On Friday last week, we had engagement with public sector stakeholders. It was a very interactive one and very engaging one. And the feedback we got was to engage more with the stakeholders or with the sector or agencies that their laws are currently under review to get more feedback from them. So the process is still ongoing. We engaged the MBA SBL to distill the responses or submissions we got from stakeholders. And we have, what we did was to harmonize these responses. MBA SBL, as well as some private sector and firms, law firms, have, extensive discussions and deliberations on these submissions. And these submissions have been exposed to private sector and now public sector. It was exposed earlier, mid-year to private sector. We did that in collaboration with NESG, and now to public sector. But the main feedback, like I said, from public sector is to, have more engagement with some government agencies to ensure that the laws that we tend to or we hope to review are properly done and in line with the agency's mandate. So that's where we are at now before we will share with the Federal Ministry of Justice for drafting. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I have come through the chat room. There are no other questions. Rather than
You are muted.
that there are no other questions. Rather, we have emails from members requesting for copies of the presentation. The email is neca@neca.org.ng. neca@neca.org.ng. You'll be able to get us at the NECA Secretariat. I think it's the time for me to use the floor to my DG. DG, sir, so that he can then wrap this up.
Thank
Hello,
you
DG.
very much.
DG NECA.
Thank you very
Over
much,
to you,
Thompson.
sir.
And thank you, the over 140 participants that's still on the call. We really want to thank you. We want to appreciate our president of NECA, Dr. Ifeanyi Oyemena OFR, also the president of CIPM, Malam Menkoba, FCIPM. Thank you very much. Colleagues in the Secretariat of NECA, I want to appreciate all of us for pulling this off. It's first in the many series of engagement and collaboration with CIPM. But just to share a bit of information with you, Next year, we'll be having our first major program in February. It's also a very fundamental program, the Annual Labor Adjudication and Arbitration Forum. It's the third edition. And we'll be having the president of the appeal court will be the keynote from Geneva. It's going to be a very fundamental conversation all about happenings and issues within the context of the workplace. So as the workplace continues to evolve, the realities of our engagement also continue to evolve. So please look forward to this program. It's going to happen in Abuja, and peradventure, the organization is also willing to partner with us to drive this. We'll also be looking forward to hearing from you. The conversation about the economy will continue, about the reforms will continue. So if you have a chance, join us, join the organized private sector at Man House Ikeja on Friday, 10 a.m. With the chairman of the Presidential Committee on Fiscal and Tax Reforms to continue this engagement. And as we have said, the Employer Summit we hold in June by God's grace in Abuja, and it's going to be a very definitive engagement in the context of what is happening. Reforms will have taken a more deepened shape. The fiscal and tax reforms will have tested it for a while again, and we'll be able to interrogate and assess its effectiveness. Conversation about trade. Trade is also something that is also gaining ground. I'll also be talking about. And of course, regulation and regulatory activities will be also be involved. We'll share the link to join the event at Man House. We'll be sharing the links probably through the platforms that you registered with. But it's going to be an hybrid event issue in June in our Employer Summit, and want to appreciate PEBEC ahead of time. We'll be reaching out to the leadership of PEBEC so that we can create an enriched conversation so that regulators can play the role of regulating and facilitating enterprise sustainability in this environment. Once again, I want to appreciate all of us. Thompson, thank you, and Shola, thank you for the coordination, and colleagues also from the CIPMN. Thank you once again. And thank you to the leadership of both organizations for allowing us to give life and voice to this collaboration between NECA and CIPM. Peradventure, you are here. Your organization is not a member of NECA. I think you are missing greatly. Reach out to us in the secretariat so that we can guide you on how you can become a member of NECA. Eventually, you are an HR practitioner and you are not a member of the Chartered Institute of Personnel Management. You are also practicing precariously. You also reach out to the Secretariat of CIPM so that I can be guided on how to be a member of the prestigious institute. Thank you once again, and we wish all of you a pleasant afternoon. Thompson, over to you.
The only thing remaining for me to say is thank you, compliment of the season, and do enjoy your vacation. Good afternoon. Have a nice day.
Please ask those that need information on how to join NECA or CIPM to please drop their emails. We'll send you out to you ASAP on how to join either of those organizations. Thank you.
Those interested in becoming CIPM members, please reach out to us with your name and your email. We'll get back to you. CIPM or NECA. But please don't log out yet. I need to get those emails.
For which to join CIPM. Welcome. God bless everybody.